A great conversation. There we go. So for today,
Well, you
let's,
know,
let's dive into that Egypt columnar discussion as it relates to harmonic resonance and what we're talking about today with the idea of rapture as a harmonic resonance and not an event. Kind of an interesting combination. So what have you heard about what the pyramid structure is? Because we did have that reveal, what was it, about a week ago, that they've used that ultrasonic imaging to identify that there's a whole lot more going on under pyramids in Egypt and presumably around the world too, because there's thousands of them around the world. So what do you think is going on there? What have you heard is going on in those tube
well,
structures?
I definitely don't believe that any of the pyramidal structures all across the world, including some of the ones that we have, in the Grand Canyon, I don't believe that those are just burial chambers.
Yeah.
They, based on what is it, ground penetrating radar, I think is what they use. And they have found, these massive internal structures underneath the pyramids that they haven't even been able to excavate yet. But there's a much vaster network underneath of these buildings. And some people speculate that they were like chemical manufacturing plants. And the way that they were dispersed and what they were used for would make sense. Even the remnants of like residue that they collected within some of these chambers, it's it makes sense that this could be chemical manufacturing. My question, though, is what then would be the significance to have these structures, A, be shaped the way that they were, and including the internal structure shaping, and also B, and more importantly, aligned to within, a tenth of a degree with, the dog star.
Hmm. Right.
So I think it's much more complex than what we understand. I don't think it was just chemical engineering, but I also think that it was more of an alchemical process
Yeah.
that relied on certain astrological energies
Hmm.
and timing and materials. One theory mentioned the fact that the dung beetle had such significance in Egyptian lore, and that there was, in fact, evidence that methane gas was being produced in one of the pyramid chambers.
Mm.
So, it makes sense, and kind of when you look at the lore in addition to what science is discovering now, it stands to reason that there's probably a lot of, we'll call it tech, that we're using now that's ancient. I saw a
Yeah.
um, really interesting concept about light. And basically the man was explaining, how is it possible that 50,000 gallons of fuel would fit into a jetliner? Where would they fit it in order to have it fly? And he posited that it was running off of ether, or what we might call free, kind of energy. So I think that the resonant frequencies in our atmosphere have been far more evident to me and to a lot of people who have kind of been awakened to this awareness of energies, might be able to feel or experience energy or do energy work. I think that people are able to sense this massive shift. And I believe that certain technologies, certain events that are going on in our government, in our space programs and academia, and all these different things that have been going
Mhm.
have been on very specific dates numerologically, which
Sure.
have their own resonance.
Yeah.
And then they've also been in alignment with very specific planetary resonance.
Mm. Hmm.
So if the ancients were using resonance to handle their business, to be able to, you know, I think, facilitate building huge structures. I mean, if you look at the possibilities for levitation, you can levitate huge stones with sound.
Right.
You know, cymatics is such a fascinating science, one of my favorite things to study. But the idea that certain people are aware of the different energies and how to use the resonant frequencies of their environment, it's no wonder that it's hidden from the common folk, and that it has long been kind of suppressed or disparaged. You know, look at the wizards and the warlocks and the witchcraft of old, you know, all of
Yeah.
these fairy tales, but were they really fairy tales, or were they really just trying to dumb you down from the awareness of this and how to be able to use that to your advantage and facilitate your own power within you? That's been
Yes.
a big theme for me lately. Personal power.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm literally making notes because I mean, I want to maybe add to or unpack a bit of what you just said because there was a lot in there. Um, I've heard about the pyramids as many different things. Frequency healing devices was one of them. So they have chambers that resonate at specific vibrational frequencies. Could those columns below have been the way that they captured resonant frequency from the earth? So whether it's to physically ground someone, we've been studying the elements lately, a friend of mine and I, and the elements as it relates to our not only I'm going to use personality, but really how we respond to and interact with life. You know, whether we're heavy in water, so we flow, but because we're so water, we don't have structure in our lives, or whether we're all air, so we're all talk and intellect, but not in our hearts and our bodies, you know, all fire, so angry and frustrating. You know, we've been talking about those elements. And the elements are an integral part of the experience of the pyramids as I've understood them, and not just, you know, not just Egypt. You know, as we mentioned, there's pyramids all over the place, including pyramids underneath the Lake Michigan. You know, there's a Stonehenge-like setup also underneath Lake Michigan. And so of course, my phone starts ringing now. Um, Underneath Lake Michigan, there are all kinds of stone standing structures. Um, there was a Bermuda Triangle, and there's also a triangle. Um, there was a triangle situation just over the border into Canada, and I happen to know someone who built a pyramid that was on a ley line between the two of them, and all of that Bermuda Triangle experience, mysterious disappearance, they pretty much stopped after they built that pyramid, which I've been in that pyramid. Really quite an incredible energetic experience. But just the idea that pyramids and those structures bring an energetic force that is uplifting, focusing
Mhm.
upward, connecting with the divine, frequency healing experiences, etc. I recall reading about the structure of Egyptian society in that what they called priests were actually just experts in a field of study. So they would do there was like a priest for food or agriculture, and that person would know about the alignments to moon and sun and time of year and when to plant this and when not to plant that and how to deal with problems in your crop, etc. So people would go and they would pay homage to that priest in that temple, and they would receive information back. And so that was sort of the development of they created this mysticism around everyday life functions. That one was fascinating, and I haven't explored that a ton, but I thought that was really interesting how they had done it. You talk about flight. We now are seeing all these like so and so created a hydrogen engine for this and that and the other thing. So the idea that from the ether, from the gases all around us, we can take that energy in, and this is a bit of the quantum, not fully quantum, but right, it's headed into the use of quantum and frequency particles, um, and using it to get propulsion, to get places. Could the pyramids have been portals? So ways to get from one pyramid to another using any number of things, because there's technology in the etched carvings of the pyramids, and women primarily use these. There is it looks like a tuning fork. I think it's called a sai, that the priestesses used, and part of what they used that for was for travel.
Mhm.
Um, Lots of people have incredible spiritual experiences in these pyramids. And if you think about church structures with a spire, right? Energy flowing upward. If you think about the idea that when you go into these buildings, you have these spiritual experiences, regardless of the religion, if you look at all of them, many have a round structure. They have circular windows. The rose windows actually have a geometric pattern to them. There's geometry to all of the internal structures. There's been some study done by individuals much more in tune to this entire conversation than I, about the repetitive patterns um, of these buildings creating frequency structures. So almost like, well, music, basically, that the building creates its own harmonic music that you may sense in your body. You're not necessarily going to hear it, but you're going to sense it in your body. So was that part of the pyramids, and was that part of what these columns are? Is if you think about a singing bowl with a tube above it, right? That's what I thought of when I saw it. So do they ring the singing bowl and that tube vibrates upward, and this is the alchemy? Are they creating physical chemistry by the experience of the modification of harmony? Because there's a theory that they built the pyramids by vibrating the stones to move, because there's no physical technology that even today we know of that can move those giant stones. Did they know how to vibrate them to move them?
Mhm.
There's more, but I mean, that's just like that's a piece of that conversation.
Yeah. Well, and I've really dug into this over the years, looking at, like you mentioned, the old churches and cathedrals. The architecture was very specific to almost mapping out the chakra system of the body. And all of those stained glass geometric patterns were actually essentially a whole song or a whole note in a cymatic frequency embedded. I've heard that that's what mandalas were originally as well. They were a visual representation of sound. And, you know, to think that people who enter these places have spiritual experiences, it makes a lot of sense because, at least in my understanding and experience of energy, being in an uplifting energetic frequency is life-giving. It really is. It's like you're getting fresh oxygen, even though you've never actually breathed before. And in kind, when you spend a lot of time in a negative frequency, it tends to drag your physical body down. I, in my own experience, have found that energy to be very weighted, very heavy, almost like you're carrying a whole extra load or whole person on your back. But being in those places and having the resonant capabilities within the building, the acoustical resonance, and then also being surrounded with geometrical resonance, which I could go into that in a whole other in a whole other topic. Sacred geometry, numerology, all of it has significance, but just being in a building like that has been found to be incredibly healing. I remember one fella who has really gotten deep into studying the pyramids and their healing abilities was a fella who actually went in and experienced the healing for himself. He had chronic back pain from, I think it was a car accident or something. And he ended up not having any more back pain from being in one of those resonant chambers, like you mentioned. So I think that um, a lot of the technology that we have now is based on technology that we probably didn't understand. I think maybe Tesla understood, but being able to use energetic frequencies to create chemical reactions, to generate matter, to take away matter. I mean, you get into the realms of quantum physics and even astrophysics, it becomes far more than we could even begin to scratch the surface with just understanding how the pyramids were built.
Yeah.
And I think this is kind of the fabric of all of creation,
Mm.
all of these elements just vibrating together in a little mandala, a little tune all its own, that is all of creation.
Yeah.
And there's a reason we live in little boxes now. They trap our energy. It just bounces around in the corners. It's ridiculous.
Well, and the one thing I wanted to say, the first thing I thought of as you were talking about this last piece of it was the idea of the sorcerer's stone and the idea that alchemically they can bring together elixirs, right? And that is, I mean, that's the nature of herbal mixing is
Mhm.
it's alchemy. It's meant to exponentially advance. So if you take dandelion and you add it to something like burdock root, right? You get this enhancement of the removal of what we call toxins, which by definition are coded frequencies that are quote unquote non-beneficial or have accumulated in excess. So, yeast, mold, fungus have even parasites, they have a function within the body. They will trap non-resonant frequencies such as chemical toxins, heavy metals, etc., and they'll sequester them for us. And they feed off of those things. In excess, they will, so the more low vibrational toxin you have, the more you're going to get these pathogens. They will, they'll more toxins, more pathogens, more toxins, eventually the system is overloaded with that non-resonant frequency and our physical vibrational frequency goes down. So we've looked at, like 74 hertz is a really super healthy physical body. When you hit say 15 to 25 megahertz or hertz, you've hit illness like cancer, where the body is effectively dying. The physical situation is hitting that. And so we bring in things that are higher vibrational frequency to offset that. So the coding for parasite comes from wormwood and black walnut hull, as an example, diatomaceous earth, etc. These all code for the vibrational frequency of parasite, what we call parasite. A symbiotic relationship, really, that has gotten out of balance. Lemongrass or neem might code for different kinds of fungus or mold. Again, out of symbiosis, out of balance. So the idea of this alchemy is the idea that we bring together things that bring you back into resonance. And the methodology of getting there, the homeopathics, the most subtle, the most quantum, the most like, the really gets down into the deep energetic layers. You then move up into essential oils. To me, that is the next most impactful way to get in. I think homeopathics are some of the most impactful way to get in. That's because we're hitting the resonant frequency. But people may not be ready for that kind of thing. So we have to start at herbs or teas, which are the the lightest because their physical density is so heavy and there's so much in their physical density and so far out of resonant frequency that they can't really hear a homeopathic. Their body cannot get to that point because there's so much density and thickness there. Well, that was a side note, but it's important part of the idea of alchemy. So I thought about Sorcerer's Stone, but then to go back to your conversation, the conversation about this, the shape of buildings, there came a point, and I don't know that I have the answer to that. You probably have it better than I do, but it appears as though there came a point when they said people are in these big, beautiful, magical, musical buildings, and they're staying too light and free and happy. When the idea of we need to be in control of this and shaping it and molding it to our wants and our needs came about, and people talk about families that implemented this. We then see these little tiny box churches, little tiny spire, right? Now we see churches that aren't anything but like the one that I used to go to is an old high school building that's a brick rectangle with some glass to it, a little bit of rounding, but nothing to get excited about. But it is a series of rectangular rooms that you go into. And now that I think about it, the worship space is the old gymnasium, and it has no windows, none whatsoever. It's a dark rectangle with lots of loud music, flashing lights. And no wonder that I eventually was like, I can't, this just doesn't like, there's nothing going on here that I like. Um, and so there was a switch over to all these little tiny block buildings, a deviation from connection to earth, connection to cycles, connections to elements, connections to herbs and alchemy, the witches, right? We've got to get people away from all of that and into this structure. And maybe, we could say that there's a dark force trying to do that. Um, but I also believe that evolution of humanity is purposeful. In other words, it happened for a reason. Um, and so is the dip so that we have the contrast and um, we seek the light, we seek the creator balance more vehemently because we have seen what is on the other side of that. Uh,
Mm. You know, I agree with you that the evolution of mankind is purposeful. I think each one of us has our own unique purpose and giftedness. I do realize that not everyone is called to a higher level of that purpose or chooses that higher level, however you want to say it.
right,
Um, but I do believe that even though sometimes things seem low vibration, even those low vibration experiences or opportunities actually end up being for our benefit in the long run. You
mm,
know, I still do believe that the principle of Romans 8:28, all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. I do believe that if you awaken to your natural calling, what you are truly called to, and you choose to step into that, that you will have that, undeniable favor as well as undeniable peace, even in the hardships, because ultimately they are refining you into something that is far better than you ever could have imagined.
right.
To your point about parasites, though, if we continue to stay in that low vibration energy, you said that we're more likely to attract other, parasites, bacteria, whatever, that are also low vibe. But it goes beyond just that, right? It goes into the experiences that we attract, the people that we attract. We continue to attract those same people and experiences that exist on that resonance where we're at. So it really is important to shift that. And I think humanity kind of saw an opportunity to do that. I don't know, 120, 130 years ago, the
Yeah.
age of enlightenment, towards the end of the 1800s, heading into the 1900s, there was just this beautiful expansion of consciousness. You
Yeah.
know, this is when the New Age was born, but ultimately
Mhm.
there was a substantial leap in human consciousness.
Yeah.
And then immediately we slammed face to face with the industrial age. And I think that was the intentional point in which everything became, you know, postmodern industrialism, you know, this just hard, shallow, superficial kind of box with nothing of any kind of value to it, you know.
And think
Um,
about that. They threw people in, dark spaces and had them working in dirty environments and sad and depressing and, all of those elements, right?
Well, and you go back to all of the world's fairs and how they had all of these huge, elaborate buildings erected within the span of like a year, and
Um,
then they just tore them down. Or we could get into a lot of the fires. Basically, I love doing this. Okay, this is one of my favorite things to share with people. Go to Google or your internet browser of choice, whoever. But I think Google is so very biased, so I'm gonna stick with Google so that you can see just how biased it is, right? But if you just type in the Great Fire of and pick any major city in the United States and probably worldwide, I would aim for digging outside of the US borders a little bit, but you will always find some great fire, the Great Fire of Baltimore, the Great Fire of Chicago, or all of these different
this guy, yeah.
things. And you just have to wonder, okay, who who set the whole town ablaze and why?
Right. We just had one of those
What
a
was
couple of months
there?
ago, didn't we?
Probably.
We did on
I
the
lose
West
track.
Coast.
I mean, there's constantly something, extremely tragic going on. And what are the odds
Right.
that ever so frequently there's some other tragedy, some new tragedy has befallen the world? What are the odds?
What do they
Like
have?
clockwork too. They always seem to happen on significant events,
They do.
significant timelines.
Yeah.
Such odd coincidences in the world.
Funny that. Funny that.
Again, it all goes back to the frequency of it, right? It all goes back to what is resonating right now. I think that a lot of what is resonating right now is really geared towards the divine feminine waking up, the suppression of that energy for centuries.
Yeah.
Uh, you can tell that it's reached a tipping point.
Hmm.
And this is not to say that, oh, all men are dogs, let's throw them to the wolves, but this is to indicate that I don't think we can swing back in the other direction. If you think of a pendulum and you think, okay, swinging all the way to the patriarchy and then swinging all the way to the matriarchy, there's a point of no motion within the center of the pendulum.
Yeah.
We've passed that point now, and we're headed back towards matriarchy, which, okay, fine, great. Ultimately, it will get to its own level of extreme before it comes back again. This is the nature of life. The ebb and flow of the polarities of the world. But I think you're going to continue to see this shift into matriarchal society or a very significant fight to head in that direction, which should be handled wisely.
Agreed. Uh, I do see though, and maybe this is because my RAS system is tuned for it. I do see a lot of men and women having this discussion about harmony and balance versus of course there's the feminist movement. There are movements that want to elevate the woman above, like so far above.
Mhm.
It got ridiculous. I mean, and that usually happens with extreme movements is they get ridiculous. I think some of the movements, and I won't bring them up specifically over the last 4 years that have come and been extreme are also a push of the, like if you had the I can't think what it's called, Newton's cradle. If you had a Newton's
Yeah.
cradle sitting there and you flicked it, the cradle's going to go wild for a little bit and then it kind of eventually settles down again. So at some level, there is this, it's like the divine feminine in all of us pulled the
Mhm.
ball back and let it go. And the Newton's cradle's been going crazy, but we're now starting to settle a bit. I think that more people are awake and aware enough to go, we don't want that to go to an extreme. I hope that continues to be the case. And I hope that whatever leadership does step forward, they step forward in that space of we need a circular table,
Mhm.
not a pyramid of humans, and not a boardroom table with someone at the head. Not that there shouldn't be someone guiding and steering, but their guidance and steering is not absolute. It is guidance and steering, if you will, of committee.
Mhm.
Let
Yeah.
me take some inputs, and let's make a collective decision. So I
Right.
think we have that potential. Is it more than previous eras? I don't know. Does the internet make it easier or harder? I think you could argue either side of that.
Yeah. My hope is that um, through the process of awakening the feminine in all of us, the victimization will end on both sides, on women choosing to see themselves as victims or allowing themselves to be victimized. And then also, on the other hand, men choosing not to victimize women anymore. Because ultimately, that continues to be the single most common fear that I experience on the day to day is, and I don't mean me personally, I mean me personally, but also most other women that I know.
Yeah,
I don't know too many women, if any at all, who have not been assaulted or accosted in some way by
yeah,
a man.
right,
Um, or even at the very least, subjugated, mocked, belittled, whatever,
right.
victim of wage gap, but generally, I think I've met more women who have been victimized or attacked by another man in in my life than I have who haven't. So
I
I
think,
think that needs to end,
yeah,
really.
it does. And I'll add women victimizing other women, women assaulting other women. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm really enjoying watching the dismantling of celebrity, and the dismantling of an ideal body type, because I do believe that the dismantling of that will mean that we could potentially stop being ridiculous when it comes to how we perceive ourselves and very hard on ourselves, because then we are harder on ourselves than anyone else. And not to the extreme of we become unhealthy because we're not paying attention to how our body looks, but we also aren't hurting ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally because we don't meet some idealistic standard that is based on Twiggy. It's unrealistic for 90% of the population.
Mhm.
Um, so there's work to be done there, but the idea of resonating within yourself, and this I think could open the big piece of our conversation is the resonant frequency of within yourself. Yourself is a seed of the divine, and the divine creator said, I want Julianna and I want her to look like this and I want her to have these experiences. If the theory is correct that the divine is looking to experience itself through me as an example, then who am I to decide that that is not, you know, that's not adequate or exactly as it should be? And be so unbelievably negative to myself that I don't experience the bliss of being. divine creation of love, which to me is the nature of rapture. No, sorry, a fussy dog here, is the nature of rapture. And the rapture to me is this deep, unbelievable experience of joy and bliss that overtakes me every so often to the point where I'm just so enamored with my situation, with myself, with my life experience, with that very moment that there is nothing that is detrimental or difficult or unmanageable or impossible, as scripture states.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I think that that is that peace that surpasses understanding, at least in my opinion. When you have that um, reconciled within your soul, that is perfect peace. I think that this idea that the rapture is something that's coming, it hasn't happened yet, is preposterous. Obviously, people don't know where that originated, but John Nelson Darby invented the idea of rapture. You can say, oh, well, but the saints will be caught up together in the clouds. Well, okay. We can talk about that, or we can talk about the energetic frequencies of it if you want. you know, um, but to think of rapture as something that is delayed or is just around the corner or is still afar off or it already happened. I mean, all of these exist within modern theology, and the fact remains that ultimately you are going to go back to source. You are going to be caught up in the clouds eventually, but while you're here, you have to make the most of the energy that you've been given. If you remember that the kingdom is within you, that heaven already exists within you, and it's just a matter of choice.
Yes.
Which frequency are you going to resonate with? Are you
Mhm.
going to continue to pick the hell that you've been living, or are you going to choose heaven?
Yeah.
It's just that simple.
The what I would consider to be a false teaching that the rapture is an event controlled by some outside energy at some unknown time that's going to be a complete surprise and may or may not happen in your lifetime. So don't expect it, but if it does, how cool is that? All of those kinds of teachings keeps people from seeking it within themselves in this moment now, in their
Mm.
place, and that level of dissatisfaction resonates through every single piece of their life. So rather than creating the heaven within their existing experience right now, loving and enjoying it and having this be, this is, maybe we had a bump today, but you know what? There's good things that come out of every bump. The constant seeking for something outside of yourself and long distance off and something out of your control keeps you in the victim mindset. It keeps you
Mhm.
in a scarce mindset. It keeps you in a place of, I can't do anything about it, so whatever. And that whatever keeps you non-committed to creating the life that is meant to be amazing and incredible and joyful and blissful and will give you those moments of rapture that you're seeking
Mm.
within that
Yeah,
lifetime.
that abundant life that you were always meant to live. Oh, it's so amazing to me that only a shift in mindset casts out demons. Like it's, you
Yeah.
know, if you truly shift your beliefs, if you truly look your beliefs in the eye and say, okay, is this something that I actually truly believe about myself, about my situation, or is it something that's been programmed in me? Do I still need it? Was it a safety mechanism? Cool. Thank you for protecting me. Now let's move on, right?
Right.
Because ultimately, we are our own devil. We
Yes.
are the only thing that stops us. It is our fear, it is our doubt, it is our insecurity that keeps us from living our true, authentic purpose that we were placed here by a divine creator to have, to
Yeah.
have this magical, marvelous experience of life, to not get too bogged down in the details of it. Because, yes, sometimes you step in a turd, but it's okay. Just go wipe your shoe off and keep on trucking.
Yeah. Yes.
It's this whole life is meant to be experienced with joy and excitement and curiosity, faith like a child. I don't know what's going to happen today. I might have spilled coffee all down in front of me, but it's okay. Let's see what happens next because maybe it'll be better than the coffee down my lap.
Right. One of my favorite sort of manifestation phrases that I've heard lately is rather than saying, I don't know, say, I'm curious to see. So, or curious
Mhm.
to hear, curious to feel, whatever, however you speak in your sort of normal language, because everybody's attuned to, some people like to see, some people like to hear, some people like to feel. I like them all. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm curious about where this is coming from. I'm curious about who has this answer. I'm curious about where this is, what event is going to happen next. That curiosity, I believe, increases hope and anticipation and expectation in an uplifted, a higher frequency, a frequency that's curious and adventurous and seeking and loving versus the lower frequencies, which are, this expectation that, oh my God, it's always going to go wrong. And that isn't it isn't a switch you flip. So I was the one who always expected everything to go wrong. And I
Mhm.
had lots and lots, every day was trouble. I was in a job that I was like, yeah, I called myself the firefighter a lot of the time. Like all I did was put out fires. Super proud of that. But what that meant was everywhere I saw fires, everywhere I saw the world was burning down, right? Negative, negative, negative. It's always going to go wrong. That's going to be a problem. If I make a phone call to solve this, it's not going to get solved easily. It's going to be difficult. Like all of that was my expectation. And I
Mhm.
said, you know what? I need to learn to expect something different from my experiences of life. And I can't say every one of them has been easy, but if I see this as I'm curious to see how this is going to be solved, and then I open my eyes up and look for it, then the solution comes around and then I'm in gratitude because I'm like, ooh, yeah, that was really solved and that was pretty cool how that happened.
I think not only does curiosity kind of open you up for limitless potential, there's a lot of opportunity in curiosity. I think too, it keeping you in a more positive and anticipatory sort of mindset. Oh, I don't know what's going to happen next, but it's going to be exciting. That
Yeah,
kind of curiosity also draws in the energy of the aligned solution or the aligned answer. So even though you may not know what's coming around the corner, you may not know what's going to happen with situation A is going to be okay because you're going to learn something new. It's going to go some magical, unexpected way that you're going to be like, oh my gosh, look at that, how well that was provided for, instead of worrying and stressing and doubting and generating this negative energy towards the thing that you're trying to work on and having it go to absolute chaos.
yeah,
I see it so often. Well, I don't know if I'm going to this, or I don't know if I'll be able to do that, or oh, whoa, this diagnosis is coming up. And why are you catastrophizing something that hasn't even happened yet?
mhm,
Consider the possibilities for miracles.
yeah,
If you walk through life expecting miracles, that's what you'll get.
yeah,
If you walk through life expecting misery, whoa, that's what you'll get.
yeah. Yeah, you're in partnership with that resonant frequency, that whether you see it as an entity, a being, an energy, however you perceive it, you walk in cooperative effort with whatever you expect. I have been doing work with, so there's a new book that's out called Shadow Money, and I've been doing work within the Shadow Money book. And the core concept is to walk in cooperative energy with money as a provision. So this morning I was doing some visualization, and what came through in the visualization was I'm sitting in a boat with money. We're cooperatively going down the river paying for whatever, my trip, the bills, the car payment, the rent payment, the property we're going to buy. Like money's just and as we're going along, trees are blossoming and flowers coming up and the water's rising, and then more people are in more boats with us, and there's this expansive experience happening. All things get paid for, all things are taken care of. We're doing this together. I'm taking my action, money's taking their action. We're doing it together versus the restrictive pipe that occasionally lets loose a little bit of sludge and I get to pay a few bills and then it restricts again. And then I wait for the next one and then I get another paycheck or I get another, client and I pay a few more bills. And it's just this kind of like contract and expand, contract and expand. It's just really frustrating. And there's this constant tension around it. Because it's now a cooperative effort with the frequency of money. Again, we go back to the alchemy discussion, right? I'm alchemizing my efforts with the provision of money and the provision of people, the provision of experience, the provision of knowledge, all of those things that come along with floating down the river of life, sitting in this amazing boat and just watching all things blossom and happen and bloom. That's the experience that I'm moving towards. Can I say that it's there yet? Probably not. We're close. We're very close. But the fact that I can envision it tells me it's like literally I'm ready to open that portal and make it happen. Versus where I might have been a year ago, still in that compressed, like I'm in mud, not flowing water. Money's not anywhere near me. Occasionally it shows up and drops a bag of stuff in my boat, but my boat's not really moving, you know. And it was about again, I'm going to bring in the elements, right? It's about bringing the water in and the wind to move my sails and the fire to create carbon, and from carbon we create structure, and it's all these elements. So how do I wrap that up? Being in cooperative effort with the energies of what you want to experience is to me the key of manifestation of anything that you're looking to do. And being in expectation of the right answer at the right time, the right person at the right time, um, and that all things are taken care of. Such an element of belief and trust. But it's not hard. It's not difficult. In fact, it's much lighter than the alternative, which is down and worry.
I would say that the hardest part about it is maintenance, maintaining your mindset, because you mentioned kind of that contraction and expansion, and I find that a lot of people get tripped up in that ebb and flow of their consciousness. They're like, okay, I'm going to think positive about the situation. I'm going to build the aligned action behind it. We're going to get some momentum. Yay. And then the first hiccup, they immediately, instead of going, oh, okay, so what is the lesson here? Instead, they say, oh no, this always happens to me. And then right there, they don't realize that it's like they've hit a Mack truck head on. They've
Right.
stopped their manifestation process dead in its tracks.
Yeah.
And okay, it might take a minute to get out of, feel it to heal it, yada, yada. Here's my thing though. If you stay there for too long, what is it, 20 seconds? If you stay in emotion for more than 20 seconds, it starts to get trapped in your body. And then you start to ruminate on it and you can't come out of it. And I'm guilty of this myself a lot.
Yeah.
Ruminating on the situation. Oh, so and so said this. Now I'm going to have this conversation with them. And I'll say this if they say this. And if they say this, then I'll say this. And you're talking to a ghost all in your mind. But what
Right.
is that doing? It's sending your sine wave of your consciousness up to the highest heights where everything is great and I'm so positive, and then down to the lowest lows where, oh my gosh, I'm ruminating on everything. And it's no wonder you feel like you're living on a roller coaster. How easy it is for us to miss the ability to have some self-control over our minds when we get into situations where, oh, everything's going wrong today.
Mhm. Daily practice of starting the day intentionally helps a lot with setting your energy in that space that, everything is working out for me is one of my favorite phrases. Only good
Mhm.
comes in, only good goes out. So setting that up as your intentional energy at the beginning of the day and reminding yourself throughout the day until it does become quote unquote muscle memory or energetic memory. So your reaction, even if you immediately go to, oh, well, wait, whoa, whoa, whoa. Not going there. What am I supposed to get out of this? How does this benefit me? What is this stopping me from doing so I can go do this instead? So that we create that positive spin. And as I'm thinking about the consciousness of money and the up and down of all that, money, I want more of you. Come and visit me. Oh, wait, you made my life terrible. Now go away. Right? Reject, accept, which is your money experience or your experience in anything really is going to echo what your growing up experience was. That's why we need to do this sort of childhood healing of relationship and healing of the beliefs and systems we embedded. So the push pull, if you had a parent who was loving and affectionate and then shoved you away, or shoved you away for a long time and then pulled you in and hugged you, and you were like, oh, that's what I want more of. And then they shoved you away again for a while, and then they pulled you in and made you feel special and then shoved you away. Whatever that experience is, you're going to do that with each of the things in your life that you say that you want. If you want to release weight forever, you're going to go on a diet for 3 days, and then you're going to be like, I can't do this. And you'll be off it for the next 6 months. Right?
Mhm.
Versus, I know that if I want to see this in my life, I need to accept that keeping bread out of my life for the most part is the way that I'm going to keep weight released and I'm going to feel better, physically feel better and keep my pain down. So my decision is I am in great communication with protein, steak, and green beans. I'm in great cooperation with steak and green beans. Bread is not a cooperative element for me. So I bless bread, I send it off, but it's not a cooperative element for me. Okay. Setting in that cooperative intention so that when bread comes around, you can say, yeah, not today, or yeah, I think I will have some today, but I'm not going to have it beyond for a few more days after that. So you have this sort of easier decision process versus the tug of war of, I ate great yesterday, like shit today. I ate great today, tomorrow. I'll start my diet on Monday. This is true with money too, right? So, I want lottery winners are a great example. I want $1 million. All my problems are resolved. No, because you have a push pull relationship with money. So what you're going to do is you're going to push it all out and you're going to end up back where you were.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yep.
I think that a lot of what you're talking about, it sets us up really, really nicely for our session today for foundations.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that everyone will hop over to the foundations circle for for our second session because
Firelight Alchemy Circle.
yeah, this idea of meeting with yourself and being able to look at yourself in the space wherever you're at in that moment and challenge your beliefs, challenge your ancestral patterns, and find ways to create new patterns and new beliefs. I think we're doing a very valuable work in ourselves and also for, generations to come, for the collective at large. We're doing great work when we're looking inward and saying, okay, these patterns, these systems, these beliefs, they don't serve us anymore. It's
Right.
time to move on.
Very true. Yes. And with that, we will sign off from this session and we're going to jump over to the Firelight Alchemy Circle. If you'd like to join the circle, there'll be a link in the text below this video. You can also message Jessica or myself, and we'll be happy to welcome you into the circle. Thanks, Jessica. Another amazing conversation.
As always.